April 27th, 1865. The Mississippi River has flooded its banks, transforming into a freezing black ocean. On the deck of the wooden steamboat Sultana, there is barely enough room to breathe. 2,300 soldiers are packed together in the dark. They are exhausted. They are shivering. But they are smiling. They are singing songs. Because tomorrow, they will finally be home. They don't know that directly beneath their feet, the heart of the ship is tearing itself apart. They don't know that the man steering this vessel has trapped them in a floating bomb just to make a quick profit. In less than an hour, the Sultana will suffer a catastrophic explosion that will dwarf the sinking of the Titanic. Yet history completely erased it. This is the story of the deadliest natural disaster that wasn't natural at all. This is what happens when human lives are traded for a few dollars.
To understand the tragedy, you have to look at the men on that boat. April 1865 was the most chaotic month in American history. The Civil War had just ended. The nation was bleeding, shattered, and in mourning over the recent assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. But for the thousands of Union soldiers held in Confederate prisoner of war camps like Andersonville and Cahaba, the politics didn't matter. They had survived the unimaginable: disease, starvation, exposure. Many weighed less than 100 pounds. They were walking skeletons. When the war ended, the gates opened. The nightmare was over. The United States government promised to bring every surviving boy back to his family in the North. But the government had a logistical nightmare on its hands. How do you transport tens of thousands of men up the Mississippi River quickly? The answer? Capitalism. The military offered private steamboat captains a bounty: $5 for every enlisted man they transported, $10 for an officer. It was supposed to be a rescue operation, but to certain men, it was a gold rush.
The Mississippi River in April 1865 was a swollen, angry beast. Heavy spring rains and melting snow from the north had turned the waterway into a violent torrent, overflowing its banks and uprooting massive trees. Against this freezing, churning current, the steamboat Sultana pushed north. She was a massive wooden palace, built to carry cotton and a maximum of 376 passengers. Tonight, she carried a staggering 2,400 souls. The wooden decks groaned under the sheer physical weight of the men. Every square inch of space was occupied. Men slept on the stairs, on the boiler deck, even on the fragile hurricane roof. These were Union soldiers, paroled prisoners of war who had survived the absolute worst hells on earth: Andersonville and Cahaba. They were skeletal, traumatized, and exhausted. But as they huddled together for warmth in the biting wind, they were happy. They were finally going home.
But beneath their feet, a mechanical nightmare was unfolding. The Sultana was powered by 4 massive, interconnected tubular boilers. They were experimental, powerful, and incredibly dangerous if not maintained. Because of the extreme overcrowding, the ship was top-heavy. Every time the Sultana navigated a bend in the river, the massive crowd of soldiers shifted slightly, causing the boat to violently tilt. Deep in the engine room, this rolling motion had a deadly effect. The water levels inside the boilers sloshed unevenly. Red-hot iron was suddenly exposed to cold water, causing massive, instantaneous spikes in steam pressure. And one of those boilers was already broken. The hasty, makeshift patch, a piece of metal hammered over a bulging crack just days earlier, was straining against forces it was never designed to hold. It was a metal band-aid on a pressurized volcano, and the clock was ticking.
At 2 a.m. on April 27th, 7 miles north of Memphis, Tennessee, the ticking stopped. The patch gave way. The explosion was not a singular pop. It was an apocalyptic force of nature. 3 of the 4 massive iron boilers detonated simultaneously with the power of a modern explosive. The blast tore upward at a 45-degree angle, behaving like a fiery guillotine. It sliced directly through the crowded wooden decks. Hundreds of sleeping men who had survived the worst the war had to offer, were instantly vaporized in a cloud of superheated steam, or blown completely off the ship into the pitch-black sky.
The sheer kinetic energy of the blast shattered the ship's structural core. The twin towering smokestacks, losing their foundation, collapsed backward. Thousands of pounds of iron and wood crashed down onto the crowded hurricane deck, crushing anyone trapped in the wreckage below. The initial blast was followed by a terrifying silence, broken only by the hiss of escaping steam. And then, the fire started. The explosion had scattered burning coal from the furnaces all across the splintered, dry wooden decks. The wind whipped the embers into a roaring inferno. In seconds, the Sultana, once a proud riverboat, was transformed into a floating, inescapable hell.
The roaring flames forced thousands of men to the very edge of the decks. Their only escape from burning alive was the pitch-black, freezing water of the Mississippi, swollen by the spring snowmelt. Exhausted by months of captivity and disease, the soldiers plunged into the darkness. The brutal shock of the ice-cold water paralyzed them almost instantly. In the absolute dark, a terrifying struggle for survival began. Panic-stricken, drowning men violently clung to anything that could float and to each other. Torn doors, shattered staircases, and even panicked swimming horses became makeshift life rafts. In their blind terror, the strong unintentionally drowned the weak. One survivor later recalled, "The water was black with human heads." The cries for help were deafening until the freezing cold silenced them, one by one. When the sun rose over the Mississippi, it illuminated a floating graveyard. Nearly 1,200 men were dead, but this was no unavoidable accident. It was a massacre driven by pure greed. The United States government was paying $5 for every enlisted man transported north. For the corrupt officers in Vicksburg, those thousands of exhausted prisoners represented a massive fortune. Knowing the boiler was fatally cracked, they chose a hasty, illegal patch over a proper repair. They gambled with human lives and lost. When the public demanded justice, the military command panicked. Evidence was quietly destroyed. The blame was pinned on a single officer who was quickly court-martialed. But the illusion of justice was brief. His conviction was overturned behind closed doors, and he walked completely free. Not a single person went to prison. And as the weeping nation mourned the assassinated President Lincoln, the horrors of the Sultana were buried in the back pages of history, forgotten along with the men who died.